Right, so thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. It's Magnus Nielsen, Lord Londonstone, and I'm continuing my exploration of the West End of London, and specifically the area which is known as St James. Now, St James, this area wasn't developed until the restoration of the English monarchy in the person of King Charles II. That was in 1660. Up until that time, it was all open countryside on the very western edge of what was then the built-up conurbation of London, or more particularly Westminster, which was growing up and expanding at all times. So at the present moment I'm still in Lower Regent Street, and let me just turn the camera around so you can see from what I'm doing now is looking up in the general direction of Piccadilly Circus. Came down here, the street is Lower Regent Street, and as I turn round we come into Waterloo Place with the telephone box, and from here we look out onto the site of Old Carlton House, which was once a royal residence. And what we'll be doing is making our way down the street known as Pall Mall, which is where the traffic is going back and forth over to the left and to the right. And Pall Mall was once the street that led all the way from Charing Cross, which is on my left, up to St James's Palace, which is up on my right. And it acquired the name Pall Mall because that was the place where the courtiers used to come out and play a game called Pall Mall, and it was a game played with large mallets and a ball, and they used to, a bit like golf I suppose, they used to sort of hit this ball up and down the street, and it became an obstruction in the end for the coaches that were making their way up towards the palace. So they removed the place for the game just a little bit into St James's Park, just a little way south, to call it the Mall, but the street retains the name Pall Mall. And just to talk again a bit about this place, it was all extensively developed after the restoration of King Charles II, and at that time one of the great features of living in London were the coffee houses and the chocolate houses. Coffee and chocolate were things which were then just being imported into London, and they were sold as drinks in these special houses, these special cafes if you like. And these places grew up to become the places like Lloyd's of London, the Baltic Exchange, the great financial institutions of the City of London. Many of them began in coffee houses, whereas here in the West End of London, the coffee houses and the chocolate houses became the gentlemen's clubs. They became the places where the members of the courtiers and the members of the aristocracy would hang out, and this is how the clubs around here evolved. This is where the source of club life. Anyway, I'm now looking out towards the site of Old Carlton House, that big empty space ahead of us. The column is the column of Frederick, the Duke of York. He was the grand old Duke of York, the man who had 10,000 men and marched them all the way up to the top of the hill and down again. He was the younger brother of King George IV, the Prince Regent, and he would have become king had he not died in 1828. So it was his younger brother, William, took over, William the Duke of Clarence, who became King William IV. And Carlton House used to stand on what is now that empty site immediately in front of us. Carlton House was constructed in 1709 for Henry Boyle, who was the Baron Carlton, and in 1732 it was purchased by Frederick, the Prince of Wales, the eldest son of King George II. And after his death, his widow Augusta, who was the Dowager Princess of Wales, continued to reside there up until her own death in 1772. So it was during her tenure that of that property that Augusta oversaw several extensions and enlarged and refined the property. And at this time the gardens of Carlton House extended, they stretched all over on the right hand side uninterrupted as far as Marlborough House over on the right, forming one of the most substantial private gardens in the whole of London at that time. Then when Augusta died in 1772, King George III granted the house to his eldest son. That was the future King George IV. He was then simply Prince George, the Prince of Wales. And so in 1783 he started this ambitious plan of completely remodeling at great expense, expanding, that would continue over the next 3 days. So what happened was that adjacent houses were pulled down, but they were required to form the wings of the property. The grand Corinthian portico was added to the facade, and the interiors were transformed with an opulent entrance hall which was supported by Ionic columns and an octagonal saloon, and some of the most opulent and expensive architectural features you could possibly imagine. Anyway, under his patronage, Carlton House emerged as the premier venue for balls and receptions and the high ceremonial life of the Regency Court. And it was here in 1796 that Princess Charlotte of Wales, Princess Charlotte was the daughter of the Prince of Wales at the time, George. Yet when he became the Prince of Regent and ascended the throne in 1820, he wasn't really satisfied with Carlton House. He thought it was insufficient for his monarchical grandeur. And what he proposed to do was build something very much more opulent on Buckingham Palace, which he'd inherited from his mother. It was the home of his mother. She died in 1819, and he came to the throne in 1820. And it was his ambition to build a house that would outrival the Palace of Versailles in France. Well, he never got quite, the Parliament didn't give him the money to do that. But anyway, that was his intention. And so that's when the work on Buckingham Palace started in 1826, and they started to pull down Old Carlton House, and parts of Old Carlton House were taken away and incorporated into Buckingham Palace. But the portico of Carlton House was taken away, and it was then set up again just a little way down here in the distance. You probably can't see it, but it's worth knowing where it is. You can see the dome of the National Gallery, and the portico of Old Carlton House is immediately under the dome. So coming down here we have, this is, I think I may have mentioned, the Institute of Directors. It used to be the United Services Club up until 1978, and it was the United Services Club was founded in 1815 for high-ranking officers in the British Army. The building itself was designed by Decimus Burton, but it was then redesigned by John Nash to look more like the Athenaeum, which you see here. Now this, again, this is a gentleman's club. Let's get a better perspective of it. This is the Athenaeum, and the Athenaeum is for people who have an intellectual interest. They've had among their members 51 Nobel laureates have been members of the Athenaeum Club. It was founded in 1824 by Humphrey Davy, Michael Faraday, and also by a man called John Crocker. He was the man who took over the main inspiration for the building, and some of the club members complained because they wanted to have the facilities to keep their drinks cool. They wanted an ice house, but it was Crocker who made the decision to install the frieze, which you can see the white figures on the blue background that go around the building. Those are all based on the Parthenon marbles, and the poem that went at the time, "My name is John Crocker, I do as I please. They ask for an ice house, I give them a frieze." Anyway, it was Crocker who was the first man who's accredited with devising the name Conservative for the old Tory party who'd been trashed to pieces in the reform bills of the 1830s. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll move, this is Pall Mall, and we'll move down here, and I'll talk about some other features of interest as we go down. Now this of course is the place one of the really stylish streets of London. There used to be, and I think there still is, although I'm not a smoker, an American brand of cigarettes called Pall Mall. So it just shows you how stylish this particular street is. Now across the way, immediately adjacent to the Athenaeum, you have the Travellers Club. And the Travellers Club was founded in 1819, especially for those young men who had ventured beyond a 500-mile radius of London. And the building itself was designed by Sir Charles Barry. He was the same man, by the way, who designed the Houses of Parliament. You wouldn't think so looking at this, but he did. Sir Charles Barry designed in many different styles. The Houses of Parliament, I think I've mentioned this before, I'm sure I have. The decorative detail was added by Augustus Pugin, so that's why you probably wouldn't recognise this as the work of Sir Charles Barry. We'll carry on down here. And, well, you can see the other large building over on the left-hand side is the Reform Club. Now, the Reform Club was created for those people, members of Parliament and other people who are supportive of the Reform Act of 1832, the one that reformed Parliament. It was one of the great landmarks of the 19th century, and you can see the steps there. That was a place where a man called Phineas Fogg, according to Jules Verne, by the way I should say, Jules Verne was a French novelist who wrote a novel called Autour de le monde en 4 bons jours, around the world in 80 days. And the idea was that Phileas Fogg, who was a member of the Reform, bet his fellow members that he could travel around the world in 80 days, starting off from the steps of the Reform Club. And they said that he couldn't, and the bet was, I think, for £20,000, which is an enormous sum of money in those days. But anyway, according to the story, and this is just a novel, ladies and gentlemen, it's just a piece of fiction, on Wednesday the 2nd of October 1872 he set off from here, and he travelled from England through France, across Europe. He picked up boats and trains, and then didn't travel by plane, they hadn't invented planes, but boats across to India, to China, then all the way across the Pacific Ocean to America. Then he travelled by train across America, then across the Atlantic back to Britain. And he arrived, and according to the story, he arrived a day late. So he was realised that he was financially ruined, and then it wasn't until he suddenly looked at the newspapers that he saw that in fact he was on time. What had happened is, because he travelled to the east, he'd actually gained the extra day that he needed to win his bet. So that's the happy end to that story. So anyway, that's the Reform Club there on the left. It became a great film. I remember seeing it as a kid. This is sort of going back into, I think, the 1957 it came out, but you still see it from time to time. Here we have the embassy of the Armenians. So we'll just make our way down Pall Mall. You've got St James's Square here, and I'll talk more about St James's Square later on. You can see Carlton House Gardens there on the left. Now, another thing that's worth talking about here is that way back in the 1807, a man called Friedrich Windsor, who in England called himself Frederick Windsor, was the first man to devise lighting, gas lighting. So he created the gas lamps. And the first gas lamps in London were installed in Pall Mall in 1807. And over the next 40 years, they started to install gas lamps all over London, lit by coal gas. Oh, down here over on the right hand side, this is the site of what used to be the Carlton Club. The Carlton Club was a club for members of the Conservative Party. So if you belong to the Conservative Party, you join the Carlton Club. If you were on the Liberal Party, you joined the Reform Club or the Liberal Club, which was over in Whitehall, or any other club. Just down here, over on the left-hand side, you can see one of the other clubs. This is called the Royal Automobile Club. The Royal Automobile Club, which was founded in 1897 for those people who had motor cars, which were becoming rapidly very popular in those days, but they needed to have a place for people who owned motor cars to have the facilities, sort of backup services, and also a place like any other club where you could actually meet people who shared your interests, use the rooms, or they've got in there, they've got all sorts of things. They've got a Turkish bath and a swimming pool, and it's still very, very popular. So what we'll do now, as I say, we'll carry on further down so Pall Mall, as I say, it's the epitome of Regency style, really, which is what it's all about. And this building here over on the left is Schomburg House, named after the Duke of Schomburg. Now the man who built it, the Duke of Schomburg, his father was second in command to King William III, who was the Stadtholder of Holland and became King of England in 1688. So he was a very, very important man. And this was the house. And over on the left-hand side, a doctor whose name I completely forget, Dr. James Graham, in 1771, built the Temple of Health. What he did is he put a bed here with all sorts of bells and whistles and things. It was strictly for married couples. This is where they could conceive healthy children. This was how it was sold. Only it cost £50. So obviously it wasn't a brothel, it was for married couples. And then over on the right hand side you have the part of the building which was leased out to Thomas Gainsborough, the painter, who lived here from 1774 to 1788. And he opened up a rival to the Royal Academy, so he used to entertain other young painters and give them encouragement in their work. And he died here, and as he died he's saying, "We are all going to heaven and Van Dyck is in the company." Now, next house along, the one with the blue clock, that is the house that shows you what used to be the home of Nell Gwyn. She was the mistress of King Charles II. Now she used to sell, according to the story, she used to sell oranges in the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, and that's where King Charles II became enamoured of her and turned her into one of his mistresses, and she eventually gave birth to two sons by the king. One was called Charles Beauclerk and the other one was called James Beauclerk. And Charles Beauclerk eventually became the Duke of St Albans. The dukedom still exists. So there's still a Duke of St Albans, who's a distant descendant of Charles II and Nell Gwyn. Here, over on the left-hand side, is the Oxford and Cambridge Club, which, as the name suggests, is exclusively reserved for those people who are graduates of the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. So it's really an amalgamation of many other different clubs. And once upon a time, actually, as we go along here, we'll see, or you won't see, Marlborough House for this very reason. The idea was that when Marlborough House was built in 1711, Sarah, the Duchess of Marlborough, wanted to have a grand entrance, but Sir Robert Walpole, who was the Prime Minister at that time, or at least very active, purchased all the land just deliberately to spite her. She was extremely annoyed, as you can imagine. But anyway, the property now is used for the Oxford and Cambridge Club, which is just down here. And we're going forward, coming into this Angel Court down here. No, you can't really see Marlborough House. Marlborough House, as I said, was built for the Duke of Marlborough, who had won the Battle of Blenheim in 1704, and as such established the primacy of the British military throughout Europe. And so, as a reward, he was given the title Duke of Marlborough. He was also given Blenheim Palace, which was the building known as Woodstock in Oxfordshire. And you can't really see the house. The house itself, Marlborough House, eventually it reverted to the Crown in 1811. It became the home of Charlotte, the daughter of King George, the Prince Regent. Sadly to say, she died in 1817 actually. After Charlotte, it became the home of Queen Adelaide after the death of her husband, King William IV, and then it became the home of Queen Alexandra on the death of King Edward VII, and later the home of Queen Mary after the death of King George V. So it was used as a place where it used to be a place where you used to send the widows of kings, English kings, to live out the remainder of their lives. So that's down here. But we've done it already. What I'm, just before we leave here, this is St James's Palace, by the way. Can you see this? Got the sun directly in my eyes. It's this building that is actually the official residence of the King, and that's why we have ambassadors and high commissions are accredited to the Court of St James. It was originally built for Henry VIII on the site of a priory hospital of St James the Less. Now his day is May the 1st, and just outside here where we have this empty space, there used to be a fair held here for the Priory Hospital of St James in the Middle Ages. The Priory Hospital used to cater for female lepers, and to raise money they used to have a fair here once a year in the 1st of May, and then they decided when it became a palace it was unseemly, so they moved the fair further north to a place we now call... Now shut up! Honestly. Anyway, it was rebuilt for Henry VIII and used as a hunting lodge. This is where Queen Elizabeth I spent the night, waiting anxiously for the news of the Armada. King Charles I passed his last night on earth before the morning of his execution. That was on the 30th of January 1649. And it's also here the place where Queen Victoria married Prince Albert in the Chapel Royal in 1840. Oh, and just before we leave, it's also the place where the coffin of Princess Diana rested on the night before her funeral in Westminster Abbey. Okay, so that is St James's Palace. We're now going to turn to the right. We're going to go up Crown Passage. One of these little parts of London which you miss unless somebody points it out to you. And here, over on the left, there's an old pub that goes back to 1690, and it's called the Red Lion. As you can see, that's what it's called. And you probably wouldn't be able to find it unless somebody pointed it out to you. The old Red Lion, reputedly the second oldest licence in the West End. The village pub in the heart of St James. So there you go. Right, now then. Got a few shops down here, pret-a-manger. Arthur, bespoke tailoring. Coca-Cola.
Cheers.
Small cafe down here. And this is going to bring us out into King Street. What time have we got here? What time? There's 26 minutes. Is it? Yes, 26. Davies, the wine merchant, St James's Wine Bar, dining rooms, private rooms, exclusive, superb food, annual celebration. Right, so we've come out of Crown Passage and we're now in King Street, and I'm turning to the right, back in the general direction of St James's Square, which is right down the other end. So here, over on the right hand side, of course it's long gone, was the site of St James's Theatre, which was opened in 1835. Eventually it closed in 1957. Struggled for many decades to achieve financial success, but under the management of George Alexander, its fortunes revived from 1891. It was here that the plays Lady Windermere's Fan and The Importance of Being Earnest, both written by Oscar Wilde, were performed, and also The Second Mrs. Tanqueray by Arthur Wing Pinero in 1893. Terence Rattigan's separate tables were also produced here and ran for 726 performances, but eventually that didn't stop it from closing down. While over here on the left hand side we have Christie's, the auction house. The first auction was held originally in 1766, but not on these premises. These premises have been here since 1823, and today it has 46 auction houses throughout the world, including Paris, New York, Hong Kong, Milan, Geneva, and even Dubai. Right, so what I'm doing now is pointing in the general direction of St James's Square, and I'm going to sign out temporarily, but I'll come back and I'll talk a bit more later on about St James's Square. So over and out, ladies and gentlemen. Bye for now.